video is sponsored by PCBWay.
Hey there, this is Seth Chaper. Normally I'd say of Team Just Cause Robotics, but today I'm repping a different team because I got to be the captain of Team Just Long Bird, consisting of 3 robots. My own 3-pound bot Subtraction was fighting, in addition to Yob Null, captained by Chris Rummel, and Colossal Avian, captained by Matthew Zhang. These 3 bots have completely different weapon types, but all of us are ready to go, trying to take on the competition. We have to fight through 15 other teams for the lion's share of a $50,000 prize pool. Let me start out with first saying, if all you care about is watching some combat robot fights, check the chapters down in the description, and also you can look at the timestamps down on the timeline and click away to all of the fights, because there's going to be a lot of explaining for people who don't know what's going on in this video. In this video, I want to talk a bit about the event, how it was structured, how I got into it, how I became the captain of this particular team and joined this particular team in the first place, but also give a wider picture of what Robot Combat is in case you're new here and you don't really understand what's going on, but you just saw, hey, Robot Combat is going to be on ESPN. What the heck is that? Now, this team's event was no ordinary event, and you might have heard by now, but in case you haven't, this event is going to be featured on ESPN. That's right, ESPN, on their special for the Ocho. Now, ESPN does this every year. The Ocho is kind of a joking reference to the movie Dodgeball, where the Dodgeball finals were hosted on a fake ESPN channel called the Ocho. But now every single year for the last 8 years, they do a special 1-day long event where they host some very obscure sports or up-and-coming sports like Robot Combat this year on this channel. So on ESPN2, August 1st at 11 p.m. EST, you will be able to see a 24-minute special cut of the NHRL team's finals. This is the only place you'll be able to see it for at least the next month during the time that ESPN has exclusivity over the footage. After that point, some point in September, NHRL is going to be able to post the entire prime time from this stream as if it was a normal live stream event, though of course it was pre-recorded in this case. And you'll be able to see all of the fights in their full length, because obviously it's about 3 hours worth of footage that they are condensing down into just a 24-minute TV-friendly segment aimed mainly at people who've never heard of Robot Combat before and who are interested in finding out what it is. So, first of all, combat robotics is an incredible sport. This sport has been going on for the last about 25 or 30 years. It started mostly with larger robots that were super big and heavy using lead-acid car batteries and found parts, and it's evolved to the point right now where we have highly engineered machines being built out of custom parts designed specifically for combat robots. I personally run the company Just Cause Robotics. This is my full-time job now, and I am one of the people working to design custom parts specifically to get new people into the sport of combat robotics. I sell a starter kit called the SSP kit, which is a great place to get started in the sport. If you're interested, you can check it out on my website. It looks like this, and it has a lifting arm weapon and a 4-wheel drive, powerful drive system to push other bots around, flip them over, and be able to win fights. Combat robotics is a sport in which robots fight to the death. There are 3-minute matches typically, during which if one robot disables the other and stops it from moving for a 10 count like in boxing, then that robot's declared to be knocked out, or they can tap out at any time to declare their opponent the victor. Now, you can pretty much attack your opponent in any way that you want that's visually interesting. So no EMPs or radio jammers. You're not allowed to blind your opponents with smoke or lasers, but pretty much anything else goes, from overhead saws that cut through the top of your opponent to kinetic energy spinners, which are the most common, that launch opponents into the air or just try to rip them apart. And you can even have flamethrowers in some competitions, especially NHRL, where they've built an arena specifically to handle that kind of abuse. Combat robotics is divided up into different weight classes, and generally speaking, you can do whatever you want under a given weight limit as long as it is safe and meets various safety standards required by the rules of the competition. NHRL structures their tournaments a little bit differently with some added weight bonuses. For instance, if you have a multi-bot, typically you get an extra weight bonus to your main robot in addition, or you can split that extra weight bonus between 2 robots of equal weight or whatever you'd like. However, for the team's event, they actually changed the rules up a little bit, and they didn't want any mini-bots present because they thought that this would be a little bit awkward for new audiences just discovering what combat robotics is, to see a bunch of fights with 2 bots versus 1 or something like that. So they actually banned any mini-bots from this tournament. Only multi-bots that were true multis with 2 robots of pretty much equal weight were allowed to show up with more than 1 entry that added up to the weight total. They also wanted to level the playing field, however, since they used to offer this weight bonus for bots that would show up with 2 robots. So they allowed a 10% extra bonus to every single robot across the field that only had a single bot as their entry in order to make it more fair. So the 3 weight classes present at the NHRL Teams tournament were 30 pound, 12 pound, and 3 pound. This meant that with the new rules, a 12 pound robot could be up to 13.2 pounds and a 30 pound robot up to 33 pounds, with 3 pound bots obviously being up to 3.3. Now, the way that fights were run at Teams is the same way as it would be in any standard tournament. You have 2 robots of the same weight class fighting it out 1 versus 1. It's a 3-minute fight. The winner is whoever survives. So if another robot gets knocked out, they lose. If they tap out, they lose. And after the 3 minutes expire, if neither robot has been disabled, then it goes to a judge's decision, which I can get into more of later. Outside of that, the Teams event was structured a bit differently. Instead of it being a tournament with a single elimination bracket where robots fight and then advance the winner, this time there were groups. So there are 16 teams competing, and the teams were divided up such that each weight class had a group of 4 bots, and you had to fight every single one of the 3 other bots in your group, and the top 2 bots would advance to the finals. Points were awarded 4 points for a knockout win and 3 points for a judge's decision win. 0 points if you lose in either way. So there was a strong incentive to win by knockout quickly and decisively in every single fight. So there are a couple important things to note. It might seem very confusing that this event was called NHRL Teams, and all of the teams consist of 3 bots across 3 weight classes, but the teams didn't really go into play pretty much at all, except for at the very end when they total up all of the points and see who won. Whether you're on the team of a bot that's really successful or the team of a bot that is doing poorly didn't really matter as far as what you experienced. So whether my teammates did really well or really poorly, I still had to be in the top 2 of my group of 3 pound bots, but it still only really matters for the rest of your teammates how many points you got along the way and how many points the other teams were getting as well. How did I get involved in the Teams event, and how exactly was all of this structured from a builder's perspective? So NHRL announced a few months ago that basically they were going to try and do a new kind of thing that they had never tried before. Last year, they did a special event called All-Stars that was an invite-only event, and it was still an every man for himself kind of tournament, but they basically selected for the top X robots in each weight class and had those robots battle it out to become the king of the All-Stars. And there was like a $50,000 cash prize pool that was divided up amongst people, partly for just showing up and having their robot ready, but increasing prizes for the further you advance into the tournament. That was still an every person for themselves thing, and it was not at all like a normal tournament where anybody who wanted to could just show up. Instead, it had to be an invite-only thing. Now, Teams was very similar in that it was invite-only. However, in order to apply, you had to be a team of a 3, a 12, and a 30-pound robot. Now, if you know anything about NHRL, you know that there are approximately 10 times as many 3-pound bots as there are 12 and 30-pound bots combined. Because the 3-pound weight class is super accessible, you can build one for under $1,000, whereas the 12 and 30-pound bots can easily be multiples of that. And there are so few events that you can actually fight larger than 3-pound robots at around the country that just there aren't that many people building them. So, as somebody with a 3-pound bot, I was like, hey, any team, please take me. And thankfully, I was able to join up with Yobnol and Colossal Avian to become Team Just Longbird, even though we had never really interacted with each other in person prior to this event. So it was very much a case of me being like, as a 3-pound builder, I would love to join any team that I can, and this just happened to be the group that I selected. That said, these people are all awesome. After actually meeting them in person and getting to work with them, I'd be happy to team up with them again at any point in the future. And I really love Yobnol and Colossal Avian's designs. They are some immaculately designed robots, and they are really, really good. As far as how I became the captain of Team Just Longbird, nobody else volunteered, so I was like, hey, I'm already a YouTube personality. I'm okay with being on camera a bit more if that's what it takes. I don't really care. and I don't mind dealing with some of the administrative stuff and wrangling people to get some papers signed and stuff like that. Of course, we all had to sign some pretty airtight NDAs because ESPN didn't want any news that this event was going to be associated with them coming out at all until they themselves made the announcement about this being featured on the Ocho. So we all had to keep everything super quiet, and they didn't allow us to bring any cameras into the fights at all to film our own fights. Even though the group stages were live streamed on YouTube like anything else, they wouldn't allow me to film my own fights even at the group stages. And I technically probably wasn't supposed to film in the pits at all, but I think I filmed some cell phone camera videos that I might include in this, depending on whether or not I get the go-ahead. So like I said before, everything that happened after the group stages, when people were advancing into the primetime finals, was all recorded but not live streamed, and none of that footage exists publicly anywhere. I couldn't show it to you if I wanted to, and I am definitely not going to break that NDA because that would be really bad for me personally and for NHRL, and I don't want anything terrible to happen from this point forward. So let me list off the names of the robots that were in the groups that my teammates had to fight. So first off, my own 3-pound bot Subtraction had to fight 3 other 3-pound bots. These were Chainsaw Kitty, Sombra, and Trick or Beater. Now, Trick or Beater, a relative newcomer, but Sombra and Chainsaw Kitty are both some of the most competitive bots in the entire field. I think Chainsaw Kitty was ranked like number 3 at the time, or maybe even number 2 in all 3-pound bots that are active at NHRL when I fought them. So definitely a pretty uphill battle for me there with Subtraction, which, while it isn't a brand new bot, I had completely redesigned it and gotten a brand new chassis and rebuilt it pretty much from the ground up just for this event. Now, we also had our 12-pound group that was with my teammate Yob Null from Team Just Longbird fighting against Promhita, Grim Ripper 12, and Bumble Blitz. Now, Bumble Blitz was one of those few multi-bots. They had 2 equally sized, equal-looking robots that have 2 tank treads to drive around on and a hub motor vertical spinner in the middle. All right, now in the 30-pound class, our group with our bot, Colossal Avian from Team Just Longbird, had to fight 30 pounds B-Force from the same Honeycrack team as the 12-pounders, Bumble Blitz. And then we had to fight Knockoff White, which is from the team behind Shatter on BattleBots. Knockoff White, a gigantic 45-pound shuffling hammer bot that uses the same weapon motor as Shatter, the heavyweight, just one of them instead of Shatter's 2. So they have an insane amount of power on that hammer and can do a huge amount of damage. And then we have Synthesis 30, which is basically Corey Nason's version of Emulsifier. Synthesis 30 hasn't been one of the top contenders in the 30-pound class, but while it is a relative newcomer, its design almost equals that of the bot with probably the most tournament wins in the 30-pound class of all, which is Emulsifier. And both of them basically have either tank treads or a 4-wheel drive and a gigantic vertical spinner in the middle. So super scary, huge weapon. Definitely not easy fight there either. My first opponent was going to be Chainsaw Kitty. Now, obviously, Chainsaw Kitty, one of the most competitive bots in the field, they have an incredibly dangerous weapon. The design of Chainsaw Kitty is actually heavily based on my own robot Division version 3. It uses pretty much the same drive system that I had developed, and it has the same sort of billet aluminum chassis structure, but it's reimagined into incredibly meta 4-wheel drive design with a thicker and more compact weapon that spins crazy fast and hits insanely hard. Now, I designed this weapon specifically to counter their style, and that is against any breeder bar or vertical spinner. I can use this, which I call the Chonk Key, because it has a really, really stout cross section. It's a 1/4 inch thick AR500 cut by our team sponsor Planeform. And this is hopefully a slightly better quality AR500 than I was getting previously from sources like Sencut Send, but still probably a lot softer than the mystery steel that Chainsaw Kitty supposedly upgraded their weapon to that they refused to disclose to anybody. That said, as long as I take a hit on the tooth, I knew that this blade shouldn't be my main problem. The real question mark is whether the custom 4935 weapon motor I designed is able to withstand the abuse of one of the hardest hitting robots that has ever existed in the 3-pound class. So, let's see if I could hold up. Now, the other thing is, how am I going to defeat Chainsaw Kitty? Well, my best hope is really to try and disable their weapon. They have a big exposed weapon motor, but they raised up their wedges so that my blade would only hit those from the front. So I would have to get around to the sides, which was not going to be easy. Subtraction is a really hard robot to drive. As the weapon spins, it likes to kind of gyro dance all around the floor, And this is the first time I'd ever competed with this version of the bot where I compacted it and made the wheels closer together than ever before. So it was even less stable than the last version. And it's a lot harder to drive than it looks like it would be. So let's see how this fight went.
Subtraction, I like the cone addition. I know that's not new
smart.
for today, but it's looking a little extra traffic cone, and I appreciate it.
Yes, me too.
Robots
Subtraction brought to you by Seth Schaefer, YouTube star and prolific bot designer. This is a tough matchup for Seth, though. Keziah drives a mean machine, and that weapon is absolutely devastating.
The entire weapon assembly has been removed from the top of Subtraction.
So now Subtraction has to do what Seth is very good at, and that's being a control bot.
Honestly, I think Subtraction will drive dramatically better now. This may improve the chances of Subtraction getting through the match.
Nope, that's a tap out.
Oh,
so that means Team Pepe Kitty Miser getting yet another knockout victory for the day.
So there were two main things that went really wrong for me in this fight. Number one is, because I'm unfamiliar with this new bot chassis, I spun up the weapon too fast, and then all of a sudden the bot was gyroing, and I didn't have my wheels on the ground and couldn't actually move. So Chainsaw Kitty got to take well-placed shots at me, and I couldn't do much. As soon as I could finally drive around again, I made a bad move, and they got a weapon-to-weapon hit I was hoping to avoid, and that broke the shaft of my weapon motor. Now, this weapon motor is specially designed for this bot and bots like it. It has a 4140 alloy steel hardened shaft that is 8mm in diameter, so the fact that Chainsaw Kitty broke this is absolutely insane. I'm not sure if there's any other 3-pound bot out there that would actually be capable of this. Though if we're being especially pedantic, Chainsaw Kitty is 3.3 pounds here.
So we're looking at after the Chainsaw Kitty fight. The shaft just sheared straight in half on the motor, and it broke all the aluminum tines around this, so that sucks, but the rest of the motor's fine, and it still spins the magnet ring, which means I can just replace the top portion of the motor and should be good to go. Kind of figured something like this might happen, but that's why I sell replacement magnet rings with the shaft already installed. So, also interestingly, like, you would think it would shear at the stress riser where the flange is. Maybe it kind of did just at that edge there, but either way, I mean, Kitty just hits so insanely hard. There's not really anything I could have done to defend against it. The chassis itself took some shots. I have literally no idea how. Like, nowhere on this wheel is there a mark where the blade went through it, but somehow that happened anyway. But everything still works. Like, drive still works. There was one shot that took out this wheel guard and, like, glanced off the wheel, but the wheel is fine on this side, drive is fine. This wheel guard was printed in the more shattery Pryline 98A TPU. So I'll probably swap it for the 95A ones like these. And there's one hit here that just grazed it, but didn't really do much of any damage. The forks came off. I think partly they were threaded on by like one screw, or like they were like one thread, because I designed these mounts poorly and I didn't buy the correct length screws. So I have ones that are either too long or too short. I guess I'll go with the ones that are too long and just leave them a bit loose, because that's probably better. But yeah, live and learn. Honestly, I'm not too unhappy with the Bobot surviving that fight, though. I wanted to tap before my chassis got destroyed. There wasn't really any point. Once I lost both forks and the weapon, like, what am I supposed to do? So I'll just take this bot apart and put it back together, and it should be ready for fighting Trick or Beater.
Yeah, that did not go well. Yeah, so the good news is my bot was actually pretty much fine. The only thing that broke was basically the TPU mounts that hold on the forks got ripped away from the screws holding them to the chassis. I think one of the screws got damaged in the front, and that was going to be impossible to extract because, as you can see here, they kind of hit below the chassis and mangled that screw hole. The bot could still drive. It was fully functional. However, the weapon motor kind of split in half. Yeah, so I had to replace the magnet ring and shaft, which was about a 5-minute fix, and then take out these screws and put them back in with replacement ones that weren't bent at all, and with new fork mounts. And that's pretty much all of the damage I had to fix for from this fight. That's why I tapped out, was because I knew that if they got a bunch more hits on the chassis, that it could be really, really bad for me, and I needed to put the bot through 2 other fights that day. So even though I had a second spare robot, these chassis are pretty expensive, sponsored by PCBWay, but still not something that I had a lot of spares of. And speaking of which, let's thank the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay, who machined the awesome anodized red aluminum chassis for Subtraction for this event. They do amazing work. They also made some epic parts for the weapon assembly on the 30-pound Colossal Avian as well, and they helped our team get to this event with all the spares that we needed to be able to compete at the highest level. So thank you so much to PCBWay. Check out their CNC machining services at PCBWay.com and use the link down below to get $5 credit towards your first order. All right, so next up I had to fight Tricker Beater. This was definitely the easiest fight that I was going to have in this group by far. That said, a beater bar is still a tough matchup for a bot like Subtraction because there's always a risk of getting flipped over. This is why I have the cone hat on top of the bot. It allows it to self-right much more easily than it would without it. I can basically use the torque of the weapon to spin the bot so that both the back wheels are on the ground, and as long as my drive sides are both working, just the torque from the wheels driving backwards is enough to flip the robot back onto its wheels and be able to drive around and spin up the weapon like normal again. Basically, Tricker Beater is a Fingertech beater bar bot. This uses a pretty common off-the-shelf weapon that isn't super powerful. It's an aluminum bar. It's not crazy hard and not crazy durable. But I knew that really their drive sides were going to be the weak link that I should go for. They've got some thick TPU armor, but it's still just rubbery plastic, and my weapons have a lot of reach, so I could bite straight through that and hit their wheels. So I put on my longest weapon. That is the long bar. It is 9 inches long, so a lot more reach than the 7.5-inch effective diameter Chonk Key. And this blade was designed to be able to outreach people who don't have crazy powerful vertical spinners. Against a bot like Chainsaw Kitty, I was afraid that this long bar would just bend, but the Fingertech beater bar is much less of a concern from that type of hit. So I decided that reach was going to be good because I have to bite straight through that rubbery TPU and hit something important to be able to disable my opponent here. So let's see how this fight went. So going into this fight, one thing I forgot to mention earlier is I actually switched the front forks on my bot to what I call the claw forks. These are designed specifically to catch the teeth on wide drums and beater bars and kind of launch them up into the air. Even if my weapon isn't working, those forks should do a good job of being able to control the fight.
Gnome hat is back on the top.
Right off the bat, I have a bad bounce, but you can see the cone doing its job, allowing the weapon to have enough torque to spin the bot around so I can get my back wheels on the ground and self-right.
In an odd way, increases the chances that the robot is going to be able to flip itself back over.
You can see a weapon-on-weapon hit there, doing absolutely no damage to my weapon motor.
To get itself back onto its wheels.
This is incredible to me. These are very differently sized robots, but they are...
You can see that with this 9-inch blade, I can pretty much hit my opponent at any position in a 360-degree circle around the bot. I barely have to even drive towards him to get him to be knocked around.
Very low infill 3D printed plastic, so that's very lightweight. It's great for absorbing hits, which actually you can see on display. It's absorbed a lot of hits from Subtraction already.
You can see that shot right there tore through like half the length of their TPU side guard.
That they weren't able to win.
Here I want to line up for a really big shot. I spin up the blade to as much as I'm comfortable with without gyroing out of control, and go in for the hit once they call for an unstick so that they use up their only one for the match.
Exactly what the armor on Tricker Beater wants to do. It jams up the opponent's weapon. That can do a lot of wear and tear in short order.
Yeah.
You do not want to try and push a weapon to spin up when it is jammed into a piece of plastic like that.
All these hits are really taking a toll on Tricker Beater now, but they still have a little bit of mobility.
Tricker Beater are able to self-right just by impacting the weapon on the floor there. But it does look like there's some drive issues on Tricker Beater. They're not able to get any engagement.
Here I back off to see if they're going to get counted out, but I decide I have to go in for another kill shot.
Oh,
that
I
it's
see,
pushing
yeah.
against the ground and making it very hard for them to drive, but they're also having issues. One of their drive sides is not working anyway.
No, it doesn't.
2 minutes in, I finally worn them down all the way to be completely immobilized.
We're going to see Subtraction take home a knockout.
Seth doing a little dance, showing off to the judges.
Folks, that's it.
Knockout.
Your winner by knockout is Seth Schaefer with Subtraction.
YouTube star and all-around great guy Seth Schaefer.
Say
By the
Seth
way,
Schaefer Subtraction 3 times fast.
I have no interest in doing that.
But the public.
Seth Schaefer, one of the most prolific bot designers and builders in the game, also has a really successful kit bot out, which we've seen plenty of at this competition. Great way to get started in the sport.
So, the Tricker Beater fight went pretty much exactly how I had hoped, other than at the beginning getting flipped over. That said, I was able to show that the cone hat, as dumb as it looks, it does work, and if it's stupid but it works, it ain't really stupid. So, I got the win there pretty easily since I wasn't really getting damaged by any of Tricker Beater's hits. Having that 9-inch blade means basically every corner of the robot can't actually be hit directly as long as that blade is spinning. And I was able to tear straight through their armor and hit the wheels just like I had hoped until they could no longer move. So definitely a pretty dominant fight there. However, I'm still learning to drive the bot, how high I can run the weapon throttle before it starts kind of going all crazy on me. And it's still very hard to drive this robot. So against a bot like Sombra, that's a top tier opponent coming up next, it was still definitely going to be a big challenge. Sombra has an extremely interesting design for their weapon. They have a 3-tooth beater, but it's weirdly twisted. I think that the idea behind the twisted beater was basically to be able to make it so that when a horizontal spinner is trying to fight against them, their tooth pretty much is guaranteed to catch because it's so wide, and that twist makes it so that there isn't like a straight path through. However, I realized that that twist could actually kind of work to my advantage. If I spun in the correct direction with my tooth facing the right way, then I could hypothetically kind of go in between the teeth of the beater. That said, I knew the beater bar was spinning many times faster, probably twice as fast as my blades are, and I don't have the ability to spin at full throttle because the bot goes so crazy unstable. So this was really just a means to try and lessen the relative speed of his teeth versus mine. Still, strategy was going to be the same against Tricker Beater, getting around to the sides and hitting through the TPU into the wheels. But because Sombra is a beater bar that's made out of machined hardened steel and hits a lot harder than the Fingertech beater bar on Tricker Beater, I needed to switch back to the Chonk Key blade that was designed to take those upward impacts without bending. I was still pretty worried that with a bot that's this powerful that it could be a repeat of the Chainsaw Kitty fight with the blade coming off, but I was significantly less worried than I was against Chainsaw Kitty, just because the amount of energy stored in Chainsaw Kitty's weapon is absolutely crazy. And even with a more efficient beater bar style weapon, I didn't think Sombra was going to hit quite as hard. So I thought that I could take some weapon on weapon hits and stay in the game long enough to hopefully get a good shot on their sides or their back. Let's see how this fight went.
Where we've got Sombra versus Subtraction.
Now this is interesting, Sam, because Sombra is a vertical spinner. Subtraction has lost its head a couple of times so far.
If by a couple of times you mean once in history, then sure.
That might happen in this fight.
Yes, with especially the way the forks on the front of Subtraction are set up. If he tries to put those into Sombra's weapon, I think that top is going to pop.
So are those forks able to go up high enough to be hit by his own weapon?
They are actually angle limited within the mounts, and that is supposed to prevent them from getting stuck up into the path of the weapon. So here I'm in a similar situation that I was in with the Tricker Beater fight. I'm going to wait for them to call for an unstick before I go in for a hit, because that way they use up their only unstick.
Are they on some debris?
Yeah, I think they were just on the edge of the arena there. I'm surprised Subtraction didn't use that more to its advantage.
Whoa, a little unbalance from Subtraction there.
We've been seeing that today, Sam. It's very strange that what is usually a fairly planted robot...
So here I got super unlucky. They managed to hit under the tip of the fork and hit it hard enough that it got stuck up further than it normally can hinge.
The answer is yes. Now...
Let me see if I can give you a better camera angle of that hit, because that was a pretty devastating shot, though it might not have looked like it. So yeah, they hit that wheel really hard, and it is completely seized up at this point, and without both drive sides working, I cannot self-right from this position.
Might be a tough one for Brett there.
Yeah, you can see not only did that weapon get in the way, but it got stuck in the way.
Looks like it's jammed between both forks almost.
So at this point, barring anything catastrophic happening to Sombra, I definitely will lose, but I want to try and get to a judge's decision if I can, because that would still take 1 point away from their team.
Sombra's doing his part to try and get Subtraction back on 4 wheels.
Reduce the surplus robot population, as Bob Barker might say if he was, I don't know, a cyborg in the year 2020. 28.
I do like kind of the red mage vibes that Subtraction has going on.
Yeah.
This little witch hat.
I think this may be it. Count out being imminent. Yep, that is it. Your winner by knockout in this 3-pound match is Sombra.
All right.
Alright, finally after the Sombra fight, so one fork was stuck up, I just pushed it back down. This is pretty much how it looked coming out of the fight. So obviously hit the back wheel. I can fold this out by hand, but it was obviously stucking that wheel, and this doesn't turn anymore, so that gearbox is totally toast. He just got a really good hit on that wheel while I was upside down at some point. This drive side still works, the weapon still seems to work. It was just the fact that that fork was in the way and it was stuck, locked up. I'm really frustrated by that, because if the weapon was able to free spin, I could get unstuck so much more easily, but yeah, he got good shots on me. He got some free shots on me, and that was pretty much it. Motor seems to be fine. There's a bit of play here. I think the stator might have come loose like it did in some of my other fights last time, but that's an easy Loctite fix. But the blade stayed on this time, so that's definitely good. I took some really big weapon on weapon shots, and the blade doesn't appear to be bent like at all, so I'm pretty happy with that at least. It was a good fight, but just didn't go my way. Shredded through this TPU, but it did its job other than the back portion. I have to figure something out for this back portion to not get lodged in the wheel somehow. I can't advance into the bracket. Oh, we got a good shot there too. So I think I'm just gonna try and file this and bend this chassis back into shape and call it a day.
At the start of that fight, it was looking pretty good for me when Sombra got stuck. I waited for them to call for an unstick because at NHRL, once you call for an unstick, you only get one per fight. And whether I hit them or they're freed by Brett that comes to save them, it still counts as using up their one unstick. And with a bot as powerful as Sombra, I'm perfectly happy to take the win if they get stuck a second time. So that's why I didn't go after them right away, even though the announcers were questioning why I didn't do that. That said, Sombra, still an incredibly tough opponent, and that wasn't going to happen again before I got pretty badly damaged. What happened here I feel really dumb about, because while the forks are angle limited as far as where they can hinge freely, when hit by such a powerful beater bar, they got jammed in the upward position, and that stopped my blade from coming around. This is normally not a huge issue, but with the bot then tipped on its back, I can't use the blade to make sure both of my wheels are contacting the ground. And while I was kind of stuck on my back, waiting for potentially being able to unstick myself a little bit, Sombra was able to come in and hit the back wheel. So they hit, you removed the armor afterwards and changed it to a different one, but basically they hit armor back here, and it got kind of twisted up like this and bent in and stuck and jammed this wheel. They also somehow hit it so hard that the shaft on this drive motor bent. I think it was actually on this one, rather. The shaft on the drive motor bent, and the wheel was no longer able to spin under power. So even if that PPU hadn't been twisted up in it, it was still dead. And without both drive sides working, I just simply cannot self-right to keep the fight going. So unfortunately, Subtraction was counted out, and I was declared loser of that fight. I really would have liked to keep the fight going, but with my weapon jammed up and only one drive side, there was pretty much nothing I was going to be able to do, unfortunately. So yeah, 1-2 record, not the best, but against such incredible top tier components, I don't think that was a terrible showing. And I still had Subtraction pretty much in one piece afterwards. The chassis wasn't too badly damaged, and I could bring it into another fight in the future without any extensive modifications. So I actually don't think I'm going to be making any serious upgrades to Subtraction moving forward. I don't know when it'll be fighting again, but pretty much the only thing I'm going to try and change is those front forks and fork mounts so that that jamming thing doesn't happen again. That said, let's go through the highlights of my other teammates' fights, and I'll show you what their record was and how many points our team had going into the finals, so you can follow up with how we did on ESPN August 1st at 11 p.m. EST.
Relatively equally weighted robots. Both robots need to be knocked out for a true knockout to occur.
We are launching wood off of the arena already, but the weapon is now off. That is a specialized weapon, and launch that spinning blade into their top plates.
Ooh, big hit from B-Force on Colossal Avian.
Yeah.
Colossal Avian's weapon was spun down there, and a huge amount of damage on the top of B-Force. You can see that the half of B-Force stuck up. Oh, another big hit. spot off the wall right now, they're hanging back a little bit.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Just save it for when you're both trapped up on the wall. Look at the weapon hanging off the side there.
The second half of B-Force are still moving. They're still functional.
Just stuck up
Just
on the wall.
Oh, look at that, Kyle.
That's
B-Force
a
is
lot
also
of smoke.
smoking.
Yeah, coming out of the B-Force team.
Oh, you can hear the countdown has begun. We are, yes.
And that is your first knockout of the day by Matthew Zhang and Colossal Avian. This is the Just Long Bird team bringing home the first victory.
3, 2, 1.
Fight, robots, fight.
Those forks doing a lot for Colossal Avian right there.
Oh no, held
Oh.
away just too far to actually make impact with the weapons. Both weapons, honestly. And they're really not able to push Knockoff White
No.
after they get under them, just due to the geometry of Knockoff White. There's nothing. There we go. There's a nice push. Got
And
under the
they
side,
land a hit
and
here.
they landed a hit. That's what they need to do. Try to get those really obtuse angles. But if they can continue to get underneath them and push them around, they will be able to rack up control points before
Kyle.
they left. Is there no movement coming from Knockoff White?
It is very quiet right now.
Yeah, normally you hear that rumbling of the shuffler mechanism. Why would you want to wake up that beast?
Kyle!
Congratulations to Colossal Avian
Knockout.
getting a knockout.
Upset of the century here.
Beautiful job.
3, 2, 1.
Fight, robots,
Here we
fight.
go. It's on.
It's moving. Synthesis is moving.
Oh no. But Corey is not spinning up.
Here into this perfectly positioned Synthesis. Yes.
We see a plume of smoke coming out of the top of Synthesis 30.
I'm also not sure if it is fully operational either.
Oh no. Turning Synthesis 30 on its head without its top armor there on that right
Tap
side.
out.
Almost dumped its entrails out onto the bottom of cage 1 and
3.
Chris Rummel and the long boy himself,
Fight,
Yavnal,
robots, fight.
completely rebuilt for this competition. And Promheta, without its typical pink weapon,
This is going to be very back and forth. You already have some drive issues on the side of Yavnal. Promheta, meanwhile, has a fork that is bent up. Do it.
corner
Yes.
as well. Yep, and another pin, another hit on the corner.
To end this match on a pin, just as your pin time runs out, this is a really good look as we head to the judges.
1.
Fight, robots,
And
fight.
away we go.
Both bots getting up to speed. No box rush, just very careful, thought out engagement.
Some big sparks coming off of Yavnal. Him on the front of Yavnal, I believe.
And that
Doing its absolute best to position itself, but there's no good place to be when you're a robot without a weapon going up against Yavnal. I'm gonna have to, see if that is a calling card where I can attract other robot builders. I never even considered that a strategy. As
Fling
hard
yourself,
forward,
yeah.
as hard
Knockout.
backward, and maybe it knocks you off, but man, when you're that stuck,
Fight,
for his
robots, fight.
So Chris Rummel really wanting to win this one, make it into the bracket. With a bot we have seen here so many times, win so many times.
if they're high centered on something, or if perhaps part of that
Tap
that bottom plate armor might have gotten
Yep.
peeled up a bit.
That is a tap out, which means that Chris Rummel and Yavnal will advance. Call it a day.
All right, let's take a look at where our teams have landed.
So, with Colossal Avian having 3 wins, Yabnol having 2, this put both of them into their respective weight class finals, where they would continue to battle it out to get the top score of all of the teams at the event. And Just Longbird was heading out of the group stages with a total of 24 points. Pretty respectable. Kelly from NHRL has announced that you'll be able to watch the entire primetime stream uncut for free starting pretty soon after September 1st on the NHRL's YouTube channel, but you'll have to catch the highlights on ESPN tomorrow as of filming. So make sure to check that out. As for what's next for Just Cause Robotics, well, I just got word today that Shrapnel Mine was admitted to fight in the September 14th NHL event. I'm going to be completely redesigning the bot from the ground up. It'll be a bit different this time, but I think it'll still be cool and interesting, and hopefully live up to the name that the original built for itself. The video with Shrapnel Mine in its first ever competition has over 40,000 views and is, I think, the most viewed video on my channel, so I felt it was worthwhile to do an homage to that bot by completely redesigning it to be cool and interesting, but something a little bit different this time. So I might make a series of videos about that process. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see, and if you have any other questions about that. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, click like, and if you want to see more like this, make sure to hit subscribe and the bell icon down below. Bye.